Growing up, Spider-Man has always been my favorite superhero, and also just one of my favorite characters overall, period, regardless of if it's a superhero or not. And so when they announced that they were making a Spider-Man game with a super narrative focus and a really, what we ended up getting, everything about this game really caught my attention. And as I mentioned in my last review for God of War, Spider-Man was actually also one of the games that I decided to switch to PlayStation to try out, and I was not disappointed. And so today I'm going to be reviewing Marvel's Spider-Man. However, I'm not just reviewing Marvel's Spider-Man, I am reviewing the remastered version of the game. So there's some minor changes there. Like, for example, the main character has a different actor for the face now. Same voice actor, though. But yeah, something I wanted to distinguish. With that being said, guys, let's go ahead and just hop right into the review. So as always with my reviews, I'm going to go ahead and start things off with the story here. And immediately off the bat with this game, there's one thing I really like and that is the fact that it is a already established version of Peter Parker. A lot of the time you'll see that they keep Peter Parker kind of in high school or will keep him in college or that young kid, which is obviously where the bulk of his stories come from regardless, but it's nice to get a different version of the character. It stands out a little bit. He's more mature. I believe he's exactly like 8 years into being Spider-Man, and it's made very clear right off the bat when the very opening mission of the game, he takes down the Kingpin, who has been his kind of arch nemesis for his entire run. And suddenly now, he finds himself in a new situation where he's taken down his main threat, and now there's a new threat, and it's something that he's not used to. And along the way, you definitely get a very well. I always try to keep the spoiler free, but in this situation, a lot of the stuff that happens in like the mid to late game with the story is just absolutely insane. The game's broken into three acts, each one kind of culminating in a big finale piece. By the way, all of the gameplay from this is in the first act, just to clarify. And each of these acts, by structuring the game that way, you get three sort of mini story arcs told over the course of this main overarching story. First you have the Kingpin's taken down, kind of the immediate aftermath, establishing the new villains. The second act, you have kind of those guys are established. It's kind of a war against them, but then at the end, you're introduced to even more villains, and you realize who the actual main villain is. And then the third act is about taking down the you know, people that were introduced at the end of Act 2. And I really like the story to this game, obviously. I won't go in too much detail about it, but I do like that there is a few really big standout moments, and I'll keep it vague, but I'll also be specific in the points that I, enjoy. One of those being who the villain is. I'll talk more about this in the characters later, but it's a character that can you can understand, as the game goes on and as things happen to this character and with this character, you start to see them in a different light, or you can just kind of feel bad for them. They're not a outright evil villain, right? They're one you can sympathize with. Um, Another thing I like is its portrayal of Norman Osborn, who is very much a prominent figure in this game, and a big overarching story plot is that he's running for mayor in this game after the Kingpin is taken down, and I like the portrayal of the character because he's not just he's not pure evil because he's not that version of the character yet, but he's just kind of an asshole, right? And a lot of the story is kind of focused on that fact, and so that's something I really liked because it's just kind of it's not a different take on the character by any means, but he's at least well done here, I guess. It's probably one of my favorite versions of the character. Another thing I really liked is the ending, which obviously I won't go in detail with, but the final boss and everything that happens after that is. I mean, I've beaten this game probably 6 or 7 times. I think this is the game I've probably beaten the most out of any game ever. Likewise, I think I've fully 100%ed it now 3 times, and every time that I play this game, the ending still gets me choked up. It is a really well written story with a really well written ending, and something that, again, I would not dare to spoil for anybody that's interested, but did want to touch on. And as I mentioned, I would touch on the characters a little bit more. I really like the cast you have here, as you can kind of expect from the guys at Insomniac with this now. The characters are very well written and developed over the course of the game. Obviously, you follow an already matured Peter, but there's still some more maturing to do, as there always is for all of us, right? And so you kind of get to see that side of things, and you get to really see him kind of go through some stuff by the end of the game for sure, and come into his own a little bit, because he might be a little bit older, but he's definitely still Peter Parker, and he's definitely still not. Uh, he's kind of cursed with having to deal with things with the people he loves the most. Bad things with those people, and of course those people would include characters like MJ, who at the beginning of the game you can kind of sense some animosity between her and Peter, and then by the end of the game, the relationship really redevelops, I guess. Characters like Norman, who really just don't develop, but that's actually, I think, a strength to the character, because he is, just like I mentioned earlier, just an asshole. Um, you of course have other characters. I don't think it's a spoiler by now to mention that Miles Morales is in this game, and he really kind of fits the role that Peter usually would in his stories, where he's the high schooler or the younger one, right? You kind of have it's not quite a dual protagonist, because Peter is definitely the main protagonist, but while you have him as a more mature character, you have Miles as the more younger, uh, outlook on things that you would sometimes have gotten from Peter, like I said. So I like that they struck a balance there. And of course, you have just the different villains along the way. Um, the two main villains of the game overall, you can really sympathize with. Like I mentioned earlier with the one, um, you spend a lot of time with these, specifically the two main villains to the game. You spend a lot of time with them, and you really get to see their motivations and what causes them to do all of this. And like I mentioned earlier, again multiple times, you sympathize with them because you know that these guys are monsters, but they're not monsters, or they're bad guys, but they're not monsters. They've been put in a situation, and they've chosen the wrong path, but they were not. Uh, Fully unjustified, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. One thing I also wanted to touch on real quick is the world here, because the world is a really well done rendition of New York City, and you can just kind of zip around, and throughout the course of the game, it is open world, of course. You have different quests, and so you can traverse the world on your way from area to area. There's also times where it forces you to do side stuff, so that's more of an excuse to swing around and see everything. And it's really a beautiful game, even if you are playing the PS4 non-remastered version. But even especially in the remastered version, it looks that much better. And I mean, I gotta say, it's truly something special. And I'm really interested to see where they'll take things with the sequel with this one. Alrighty, I also wanted to touch on the side content in this game, because as I mentioned earlier, kind of in passing, I've actually platinumed this game 3 times. I've platinumed the remastered version only once, to be fair, but as I've mentioned in past videos, I've had multiple accounts, and so I platinumed the base game on my original account, then the base game on my new account, then the remastered version on my new account. And so one thing that really stands out is just how fun it is to do the side content. It's there for you. So you can unlock the radio broadcast towers, which are little icons on the map that once you scan them will then actually unlock the map, and you can see all the collectibles and things just right there. And so you don't have to follow a guide by any means as to how to find things, when it's just pull up the map and there's the icons. And I love that. It's a very fun platinum to just kind of, or even if you're just in it for the side content, period, it's really honestly fun to just pop on some music or something like that and just swing around and, beat people up. And that's something that I really enjoyed, and is honestly, one of my favorite parts of the game. Is even outside of the story, there's so much to do, but that content is so fun and rewarding. You can unlock all sorts of things, like unlockable suits, more gadgets you can use, more combat styles, which I'll touch on in the combat. All of that will be touched on here in the combat gameplay section. And overall, I mean, it's really fun to just kind of hunt things down. There's actually some bosses hidden in side quests that you wouldn't necessarily know you could fight otherwise, and so that was something I really enjoyed. There is a reward to do these things, and it's just fun to do it anyways, you know. And speaking of the gameplay to this game, or the combat specifically, it's very much a third person action, borderline like brawler, in the sense that you're really able to just beat the shit out of everybody. And it's really fun. The gameplay is really addicting, actually. I love it. Like, I have zero complaints with this gameplay, but on top of just the base gameplay, you also have different unlockables. Like I mentioned earlier, there's gadgets and abilities and suits. And so every suit in the game has its own ability that you can use in combat to kind of make things, spice things up a little bit. Likewise, you get gadgets. And so, especially if you're in something like a stealth section, gadgets can come in handy to take out multiple enemies at once without having to go down and actually risk getting caught by somebody. Or even in combat, just fun to use them, period. Mix them in a little bit. It's really, and there's also the different abilities to help upgrade your different attacks or learn new combos. And it's really, by the end of the game, it never gets stale because you're constantly unlocking new things to keep spicing it up. And even if you weren't, it would never get stale because the combat is just that fun on its own. Alright guys, I've talked about a lot of this game now, and all of it was pretty good. I don't really have any complaints with the game. You know, I really wouldn't have chosen to play this game so many times if I didn't enjoy it. And quite frankly, I think this is definitely one of those must-own games, and to me personally, it's borderline perfect, and so it should really come as no surprise that I'm giving this game a score of 10 out of 10. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed, a like is always appreciated, and if you're new here, why not go ahead and subscribe for more videos just like this. With that being said, guys, hopefully I'll see you guys back in the next video. Have a good one.